A hallway being a low dwelling area, and the person not speaking, I mean, again, it has to be school policy. If you don't allow students in hallways, I would prefer it in the classroom that we know is ventilated if we can. But again, if you mark it out and you do it and you give that permission, if the person is quiet and they're just taking a drink break, the risk is so low and it's not an accumulating risk. The real risk of a mask coming off is somebody talking. And I see this, I mean, what I had to do at one workplace, everyone's wearing masks. They're actually right on top of each other because of the job function that they have. And we had a policy of no drink at your station where you were working, because you need to take the mask off when you're really close to somebody, and human behavior is you will continue talking and forget that you've taken it off. And I walked around and I watched exactly that happen. The person lifted up their mask, they took a drink, and then turned to the person on their shoulder and went blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, no, this is why we don't have water here, because we don't have it at our station, because human nature does that. So if you had two classroom doors side by side, two different classrooms, I wouldn't do that, because two kids standing out there, mask off, human nature is they have a chat, you can't control it. But the risk that they present to the hallway, if you can have good spacing, is so low that it's not on my scale of what I'm worried about with accumulation. Now, windows that only partially open take a little bit more creativity. You can duct them into it. So again, any type of fan that you can create, and then you can actually just put a flexible vent on it and fit it into that space, works perfectly well. When we were trying to design at Westport High, the negative space for the nurses' room, we had no windows that would open because they were right next to the front door. And we couldn't work out how to actually do that until the maintenance said, well, I've just got an easy space here, I'll go through the wall. And he actually ducted bathroom exhaust vents into the ceiling of that and put them straight out the side. So, I mean, you put it into the creativity of the people that you're working with, like that can do this for you. All we need is some way to take the air from inside the classroom and get it out. In my perfect world of us putting this together, perfect world, we've all got great HVAC systems that heat and cool and maintain that. But in my pandemic world, working with what we have, is I would like to have fans in each of the windows of the classrooms blowing air out, the doors to our classrooms open, bringing air in, and then having some sort of large area where air can come into the school, be at the front doors. And I know you can't do that, but finding a window or windows up high that allow air to come in. And what that does is it drags air down the hallways. So we now ventilate those hallways that aren't ventilated. We now take what's from the classroom and we take it to the outside, and we end up with a really well ventilated entire space of our school. The reason I don't like fans, and everyone's sort of like, let's have fans and let's face them in. If you do it that way, you blow what's in the classroom into the school, and it's only adding a little bit of extra risk, but why do it when we can do it the other way and take it out? So that's just, the thinking that I put forward with this. Again, those $30 box fans may seem like they're not a solution, but they are a huge solution when we don't have proper filtration or good ventilation through the mechanical systems. So I understand I'm not involved in policy here. I'm talking from the science point of view. One of the things that we're putting into a couple of schools that are in Massachusetts, so again, different policy, and we'd have to work this out with the people that are really in charge, is in our classrooms, we're actually building in 5-minute breaks per hour with mask off. So the science shows that a person that takes their mask off and does not talk actually puts out fewer respiratory droplets than a person that is talking quietly with a mask on. So if you're in the correct situation, you can actually create a quite safe room environment. We need the ventilation to be working, but if you can have a quiet 5-minute break with the mask off, the risk it presents to the room is actually lower than people talking with masks on. So in some schools where that can happen, I mean, the students must remain quiet. You can build in like I have built in 5-minute breaks into those. The other thing is I really worry about compliance. And if we go to 5 hours of wearing mask, we're going to have people sneaking breaks and doing things and doing it more risky. And I do get worried about the abstinence only approach, like it must stay on at all times unless we're 20 feet apart outside. So in classrooms that can create this space, what we try to do is at the very front or the very back of the room, I actually mark out an 8-foot by 8-foot box in the classroom, and I get somebody to go and stand in that far corner of that classroom. They can take their mask off, they can have a sip of water, spend a few minutes in there, put their mask back on, and move back to their table. Again, I try to work towards giving people a little bit of liberty to just relax with the mask use, but also maintain safety. Now, that may not be allowed based on our guidance and things like that in Rhode Island, but these are some of the things that we've put in place in some of the Massachusetts schools where there is appropriate space and the appropriate ability to maintain control of that. Because if masks come off and everyone starts talking, absolutely it should not happen. But in a classroom I was in yesterday, there was more than enough space to make that 8-foot by 8-foot box, stand them in the corner, let them have a sip of water, close that back up. If you don't have it in there, and again, it depends on what you're putting in place, we marked a box just outside the classroom door because nobody's walking up and down the corridor in class times where they can go and do that as well. So, I mean, that would need to be cleared, but when we look from a science point of view, a person sitting there and just breathing quietly without a mask on in a well-ventilated space presents a very, very low risk in regards to infection for others.